The champagne flutes shattered against the marble floor of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom like brittle promises, their golden fizz pooling at the feet of 200 stunned guests. Ryan's voice cracked through the hush, raw and unyielding. "Dad, she's lying to you about everything." His father's face, etched with the fine lines of a life rebuilt from ashes, crumpled not in anger but in the slow-dawning horror of a man staring into the abyss of his own blindness. In that frozen instant, as the bride's veil slipped from her manicured fingers, Ryan knew he'd just traded his family's fragile peace for a truth that could either shatter them all or stitch them back together, bloodied, but whole. New York City had always been Ryan's chaotic heartbeat, a sprawling beast of steel and secrets where dreams collided with despair on every corner. At 22, he was a junior at NYU, majoring in journalism because words, he believed, could unearth the buried and the broken. His life wasn't perfect. Far from it. His mother, Elena, had died 5 years earlier from a sudden aneurysm, leaving a void that echoed through their Upper West Side brownstone like a ghost's unfinished symphony. Ryan's father, Thomas Hale, had poured himself into his work as a senior editor at The New Yorker, building walls of ink and deadlines to keep the grief at bay. But lately, those walls had cracked, letting in light, and Laura Voss, the poised philanthropist who'd swept into their lives like a summer storm. Laura was everything Elena hadn't been. Polished, ambitious, with a laugh that tinkled like crystal and eyes that promised reinvention. She'd met Thomas at a gala for the Whitney Museum, where she chaired the board, and within months they were engaged. Ryan had watched it unfold with a knot in his gut he couldn't name at first. It wasn't jealousy exactly, more like intuition, the kind that prickled the skin before a thunderstorm. Laura was kind enough to him, slipping him invitations to exclusive events and compliments on his sharp mind. But there was always a calculation in her gaze, like she was appraising a painting for its resale value. And then there was Matthew. God, Matthew. Ryan had first noticed him at a rooftop party in Brooklyn last spring, where the skyline glittered like a spilled jewelry box and the air hummed with indie folk and unspoken longings. Matthew Kane, 24, was a photographer for Vice, all lean muscle and quiet intensity, with hazel eyes that seemed to capture light like his lens did. His dark curls fell just so over his forehead, and when he smiled rarely but devastatingly, it felt like the world tilted toward you. They'd bonded over a shared disdain for small talk, trading stories of late-night shoots and the ache of chasing stories that mattered. By summer's end, what started as flirtatious banter had deepened into something tentative and terrifying. Late-night walks along the Hudson, hands brushing in the dark, confessions whispered over cheap whiskey about the boys who'd broken their hearts in high school. Matthew was the first person Ryan had ever told about his sexuality. Not in a grand coming-out scene, but in fragments, pieced together over falafel runs and subway rides. "I'm gay, Matt," he'd said one rainy afternoon in Washington Square Park, the words tumbling out as they sheltered under a ginkgo tree. Matthew had paused, rain dripping from his jacket, then cupped Ryan's face and kissed him, slow and sure, like sealing a pact. It was the kind of love that felt like coming home after years adrift, all warmth and wonder, with just enough edge to keep it real. They weren't rushing. Matthew's freelance gigs kept him nomadic, and Ryan's classes devoured his days. But in stolen moments, they built something solid, something Ryan clung to like a lifeline, which made the wedding invitation feel like a grenade. Thomas had proposed in Central Park at dawn, on the very bench where he'd once proposed to Elena, and Laura had said yes with tears that seemed genuine enough. The ceremony was set for a crisp October afternoon at the Plaza, a nod to old New York glamour. Ryan had RSVP'd with a smiley face emoji, but inside, the doubts gnawed. Laura's stories never quite aligned, her family foundation in Boston that no one could trace. The way she dodged questions about her past with a deflection and a dazzling smile. And then, 2 weeks before the big day, Ryan stumbled onto the first thread that would unravel it all. It was a Thursday night, the kind where the city exhaled after rush hour, and Ryan was crashing at Matthew's tiny loft in Williamsburg after a brutal ethics seminar. They were tangled on the futon, Matthew's camera bag spilling lenses across the floor, when Ryan's phone buzzed with a forwarded email from an anonymous tip line at the NYU paper. "Check this," the subject read. Attached was a grainy PDF. Laura's marriage certificate from 2018, dissolved after just 6 months. Her ex-husband? Victor Lang, a disgraced hedge fund manager who'd vanished after embezzling millions from clients, including Ryan's blood ran cold, Thomas's own investment portfolio. Elena's life insurance had barely covered the funeral. Thomas had sunk the rest into Lang's sure thing, only to watch it evaporate overnight. Ryan sat up, the screen's glow casting shadows on Matthew's concerned face. This can't be right. But it was. A quick dive into public records confirmed it. Laura Voss, née Harlan, had been Lang's trophy wife, signing prenups that shielded her from the fallout. Victor was still a ghost. Rumors of offshore accounts, a yacht in the Caymans, but Laura? She'd reemerged in New York like a phoenix. Her philanthropy, funded by ghost money. Was she playing Thomas for a fool? Or worse, revenge for the scrutiny that had tanked Victor's empire? Matthew rubbed Ryan's back, his touch grounding. "You gotta tell him, before it's too late." But Ryan hesitated, the words sticking like thorns. Thomas was happy, radiant, even, for the first time since Elena. To accuse Laura without proof felt like betrayal. So Ryan dug deeper, nights blurring into a frenzy of database crawls and cold calls to Victor's old associates. What he found wasn't just financial deceit. It was darker. Whispers of threats, a private investigator's report hinting at Laura's involvement in Victor's disappearance. Not murder, but coercion, a forced exile that left him broken. And the kicker, Thomas's brownstone was now in both their names, a tidy asset for a woman who'd lost everything once. The night before the wedding, Ryan confronted her in the hotel suite, the city lights fracturing through the rain-streaked windows. Laura was radiant in silk pajamas, sipping chamomile like a queen. "Ryan, darling, you're imagining shadows." But her eyes, those calculating eyes, flickered. When he pressed, showing her the documents, she laughed, low and venomous. "Your father's a mark, just like Victor. But unlike him, Thomas will sign it all over willingly. And if you interfere..." She trailed off, her manicured nail tracing the edge of a letter opener on the desk. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Sleep evaded him that night, Matthew's arms a temporary anchor in the storm. By morning, as the organ swelled in the plaza's gilded hall, Ryan made his choice. Bursting through the double doors in his rented tux, heart hammering like a war drum, he didn't just stop the wedding. He ignited a reckoning that would force them all to face the ghosts they'd buried. The gasps rippled outward as Ryan strode down the aisle, his face pale but set. Thomas turned, mid-vow, the ring hovering like a guillotine. "Son." Laura's smile froze, a porcelain mask cracking. "Dad?" Ryan said, voice steady despite the tremor in his knees. "I love you too much to let this happen." He thrust the folder forward, pages spilling like confetti from hell, emails, transfers, the investigator's damning timeline. "She's not who you think. She's Victor Lang's wife. And she's here to take everything you have left." Chaos erupted then, a symphony of whispers and clinking glass. Ushers moved to intervene, but Thomas waved them off, his eyes devouring the evidence. Laura's composure shattered. She lunged for the folder, nails raking Ryan's arm. Lies. All lies from a jealous boy. But the guests, old colleagues, Elena's friends, leaned in, phones already lighting up the room like fireflies in the fray. Matthew, seated in the back row as Thomas's chosen best man, rose like a shadow detaching from the wall. He'd insisted on coming, for moral support. But now Ryan saw the steel in his posture, the way he positioned himself between Ryan and the crowd. Their eyes met across the melee, a silent vow, fierce and unspoken. In that gaze, Ryan found his footing. This wasn't just about saving his father. It was about claiming his own truth, the love he'd hidden for fear of more loss. As security escorted Laura away, her heels echoing like accusations, Thomas pulled Ryan into a crushing hug. "What have you done?" he whispered, but there was no recrimination, only awe, and beneath it, the raw edge of gratitude. The wedding dissolved into a wake without a body, guests milling like mourners at an unburial. Ryan retreated to a side alcove, adrenaline crashing, Matthew at his side with a stolen flute of untouched champagne. "You were brave," Matthew murmured, his thumb tracing Ryan's bruised knuckles. "Stupid, maybe, but brave." Ryan laughed, a broken sound, leaning into the solid warmth of him. For the first time that day, the city outside felt less like a cage and more like a canvas, vast, unforgiving, but there's to paint. But truths, once loosed, have a way of circling back. As the sun dipped low over Central Park, casting the plaza in amber, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think this ends here?" Victor's watching, and he always collects. The knot in his gut returned, tighter than before. Saving a life, it turned out, was just the beginning of the fight. The brownstone on West 82nd Street had always been a sanctuary, its creaky oak floors and bay windows whispering of Sundays with Elena baking apple turnovers, flour dusting her apron like fresh snow. But that first night after the wedding, that wasn't. It felt like a mausoleum. Stale air thick with unspoken accusations, the walls leaning in as if to eavesdrop on the fallout. Thomas paced the living room, the folder of evidence splayed across the Persian rug like autopsy photos. While Ryan nursed a mug of chamomile gone cold, Matthew's hand a steady weight on his knee. "How could I have been so blind?" Thomas muttered, not for the first time, his voice a gravelly echo of the man who'd once read bedtime stories with theatrical flair. Ryan wanted to say it wasn't his fault. Love, after all, was the ultimate con artist, dressing deceit in diamonds and devotion. But the words stuck, tangled with his own guilt. Had he waited too long? Pushed too hard? Laura's parting shot in the plaza lobby. "You'll regret this, Ryan. Family sticks together, or it bleeds," replayed in his mind like a looped nightmare. And Victor Lang? The name alone conjured tabloid ghosts. The 2019 scandal that had splashed across page 6, hedge fund wunderkind turned fugitive after siphoning $47 million, leaving investors like Thomas ruined. Elena's death had been the cruel capstone. Her policies barely covered medical bills, and the portfolio's collapse had forced Thomas to sell heirlooms just to keep the brownstone. Matthew broke the silence, his voice calm as a shutter click. "We need a plan. Not just for the money, for safety." He was good at that, Matthew, distilling chaos into focus, his photographer's eye spotting patterns where others saw static. Born in Chicago to Irish immigrants, he'd clawed his way to New York on grit and grants, sleeping on couches until his shots of Occupy Wall Street went viral. Ryan admired that resilience, the way it mirrored his own quiet defiance. But tonight, admiration edged into something deeper, a pull that made Ryan's pulse stutter whenever their fingers intertwined. Thomas nodded, rubbing his temples. "First thing tomorrow, I call my lawyer. Reverse the property transfer. Freeze the accounts." He glanced at Ryan, eyes softening. "You saved me, kid. I owe you." The words landed like absolution, but Ryan felt the undercurrent, the unspoken, "But what about you?" Thomas had never pried into Ryan's life, not really. Elena had been the bridge for those talks, her gentle nudges toward honesty. Since her death, Ryan's dates had been shadows, his coming out a solo whisper into the void. Telling Thomas about Matthew? It loomed like another aisle interruption, too raw for this wreckage-strewn night. They sent Thomas to bed with a Scotch neat, then Matthew and Ryan migrated to the kitchen, the heart of the house where Elena's recipe cards still yellowed on the fridge. Matthew pulled ingredients for improvised tacos, ground turkey from the freezer, limes rolling like forgotten worries across the counter. As they chopped onions, tears blurring the knife work, Ryan finally cracked. What if she comes back? What if Victor does? Matthew set down the blade, drawing Ryan close, his shirt smelling of darkroom chemicals and home. "Then we face it. Together." The kiss that followed was soft, exploratory, a balm against the storm, a brush of lips that spoke of tomorrows, not just survival. But tomorrows brought reporters. By dawn, the story had leaked. Anonymous sources, no doubt Laura's parting gift, and Ryan's inbox overflowed with requests. Hero son derails gold digger wedding. He ignored them, focusing on classes, but the campus buzzed. Friends clapped him on the back. Strangers whispered. Matthew, ever the buffer, fielded calls from his editor, pitching a photo essay on New York's hidden frauds. Make me look less like a train wreck, Ryan joked, but inside, the exposure chafed. Journalism was his armor, yet being the story felt like stripping bare. Midweek, the first real shadow fell. Ryan was in the library, buried in microfilm on Lang's trial transcripts, when his phone vibrated with a photo. The brownstone's front door ajar, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. No note, just the implication. Heart slamming, he bolted home, Matthew meeting him on the stoop with a baseball bat scavenged from the basement. Inside, nothing was taken. Drawers rifled, Elena's jewelry box tipped, but pristine. A message scrawled in lipstick on the hallway mirror. Debts get paid. Laura's shade. Unmistakable. Thomas insisted on police, but the report felt futile, vague threats. No prints. That night, over takeout lo mein, he opened up in a way he hadn't since the funeral. Your mom. She saw through people. Said I was too trusting. Always chasing the next big story. His laugh was bitter. Guess she was right. Ryan seized the moment, words spilling like the soy sauce packet he'd fumbled. Dad, there's something I need to tell you. About me. And Matthew. Thomas stilled, fork midway to mouth, then set it down. I figured, son. The way he looks at you. Like you're the only frame that matters. Relief flooded Ryan, hot and unexpected. No fireworks, just quiet acceptance, the kind that mends without fanfare. Emboldened, they fortified. New locks. A security system funded by Thomas's advance on a memoir deal. Matthew moved in temporarily, his gear cluttering the guest room, turning it into a war room of sorts. Late nights blurred into strategy sessions. Ryan cross-referencing Laura's socials. Matthew staking out her Soho penthouse with a telephoto lens. They caught glimpses. Laura lunching with slick lawyers, her laugh carrying on the wind. But no Victor. The man was a specter, his last confirmed sighting a blurry yacht photo off Miami. 2 years old. Fall deepened, leaves carpeting the sidewalks in crimson and gold, and with it came a fragile rhythm. Ryan and Matthew carved out pockets of normalcy. Brunch at Sarabeth's, where they'd split pancakes and plot their future. Walks in Riverside Park, hands linked defiantly against the chill. Love, Ryan discovered, wasn't fireworks but hearth fire. Steady, warming the edges of fear. Matthew talked of road trips, photographing the Southwest's red rocks. Ryan dreamed of co-authoring exposés, their bylines entwined. It was romantic in its ordinariness, humanistic in its hope, that even in betrayal's wake, connection could bloom. Yet the noose tightened. A week before Thanksgiving, Thomas received a package. A single cufflink, engraved with Elena's initials, the one lost in the portfolio crash. Enclosed note, typed and anonymous. Return what's mine, or lose what's left. Panic set in. Thomas hadn't slept, his editorials turning frantic. Ryan, meanwhile, traced the cufflink to a pawn shop in Queens. Sold 6 months prior by a woman matching Laura's description. Proof but slippery. That evening, as snow flurried the windows, Matthew pulled Ryan onto the fire escape for air. The city sprawled below, a glittering indictment. We're in this, Matthew said, breath fogging the iron. But promise me, if it gets too hot, you run. Ryan shook his head. Fierce. Not without you. Their kiss tasted of salt and resolve, a vow etched in the cold. But as they climbed back in, Ryan's phone lit with a voicemail. A distorted voice, male, gravel over static. Tell your father the wedding's back on. Or the next package is her ring, from his cold finger. The threat hung like frost, crystalline and lethal. Ryan deleted it, but the chill lingered. Saving Thomas had exposed not just Laura's lies, but the rot beneath. The greed that festered in America's gilded underbelly, where love was currency and truth a weapon. As they huddled in the kitchen, plotting their counterstrike, Ryan wondered if the life he'd saved was worth the one now teetering on the edge. Winter clamped down on Manhattan like a vice, the wind off the East River slicing through overcoats and resolve alike. Ryan's world had narrowed to a triage of threats. Laura's escalating harassments, dead flowers on the stoop, slashed tires on Thomas's Prius, and the phantom of Victor Lang, whose name now haunted their dreams like a bad sequel. The cufflink incident had been the spark. Now the fire licked at their heels. Anonymous emails flooded Thomas's work account, laced with details only an insider could know. Elena's unpublished poems, the scar on Ryan's knee from a childhood bike crash. "I see you," they taunted. "All of you." Matthew, with his network of stringers, uncovered the first solid lead. Victor wasn't vanished. He was holed up in a nondescript condo in Jersey City, under the alias Elliot Grant, piecing together a shadow life from crypto scams and bitter exiles. A Vice contact had tailed him to a dive bar in Hoboken, snapping photos of a gaunt man in his 40s, once handsome features hollowed by paranoia, nursing a Boilermaker and scanning the room like a hunted animal. "That's him," Ryan breathed, zooming in on the grainy shot. The eyes, cold, appraising, mirrored Laura's, a matched set of predators. Confrontation brewed, but Ryan urged caution. "We go to the cops with everything. Build a case." Thomas agreed, his lawyer drafting restraining orders, but bureaucracy was a glacier, slow, indifferent. In the interim, life insisted on intruding. NYU's winter formal loomed, a glittering distraction in the Great Hall, where students in thrift store finery danced away final stress. Ryan hadn't planned to go, too much shadow in his step, but Matthew cornered him in the brownstone's hallway, bow tie askew, eyes alight. "One night, pretend we're normal." Normal. The word tasted like ash, but Matthew's plea cracked him. They arrived fashionably late, Ryan in a borrowed velvet blazer that smelled faintly of Thomas's cologne, Matthew's arm a bold loop around his waist. Heads turned, not in shock, but subtle acknowledgement. NYU's queer scene was a tapestry, woven tight. On the dance floor, under disco balls fracturing light like memories, they swayed to synth-pop remixes, Matthew's cheek against Ryan's temple. "Remember our first dance?" Matthew whispered, invoking that rainy park kiss. Ryan hummed a scent, letting the music drown the dread. For 3 songs, it worked. The world a blur of laughter and possibility, love a defiant pulse. But dawn brought reckoning. Over coffee in a Bleecker Street cafe, Matthew's phone pinged with a tip. Laura, holed up in a midtown Airbnb, meeting a PI known for dirty work. "We tail her," Ryan decided, adrenaline overriding sense. They borrowed a nondescript sedan from Matthew's roommate, parking curbside as dusk bled into neon. Laura emerged at 7:42 p.m., coat belted tight, slipping into a black SUV. The PI, burly, scarred, joined her, their heads bent in conference. Matthew's camera whirred silently from the back seat, capturing plates, gestures, the glint of a burner phone. It led them to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn's industrial underbelly, where shipping containers loomed like forgotten confessions. They hung back, hearts thudding, as Laura and the PI unloaded boxes. Documents? Gear. Into a chain-link lot. Then silhouettes, 2 men arguing in shadows. One shoved. The other drew a glint of steel. Knife, not gun, but lethal all the same. "Shit," Matthew hissed, lens trained. Ryan's hand clamped his arm. "Wait, that's Victor." The recognition hit like vertigo. Victor Lang, alive and feral, gesturing wildly at Laura, his voice carrying on the wind. "You promised. The boys the key, leverage." Laura's reply was ice. "I tried. Now it's your mess." The knife flashed. Victor lunged. Not at her, but the PI, who crumpled with a gurgle. Blood pooled black under sodium lights. Laura bolted, SUV peeling into the night. Victor vanished into the stacks, a wraith swallowed whole. They didn't chase, instinct screamed flight. Back in the car, shaking, Matthew radioed an anonymous tip to 911 while Ryan drove, white-knuckled, through the maze of bridges. By the time they hit the brownstone, sirens wailed distant. Thomas was waiting, face ashen from a call from his contact at the precinct. Murder in Red Hook. They found the body, tied to Lang's old firm. He pulled Ryan into a hug. Fierce. You could have been there. But Ryan saw the fracture. Thomas's eyes, hollowed by the reminder of Elena's sudden end. We're done playing detective, Thomas decreed. Feds from now on. The feds arrived the next day, 2 agents in off-rack suits. Their questions a scalpel dissection. Ryan and Matthew recounted the tale, the photos time-stamped evidence. Victor emerged as the linchpin. Not exiled victim, but architect of his own fall, with Laura as accomplice in a long con. The warehouse hit was a cleanup, the PI had grown a conscience, threatening exposure. Classic escalation, Agent Reyes noted, flipping through Matthew's prints. Lang's desperate. You'll need protection. Protection meant details. Unmarked cars outside. Ryan's class is virtual. Matthew's shoots postponed. Isolation bred intimacy, though. Snowbound in the brownstone. They baked Elena's turnovers from memory, flour dusting Matthew's curls like stars. One evening, by the fire, Thomas raised a glass. To family, the ones we choose. His gaze lingered on Matthew, warm. Welcome aboard, son. Matthew flushed, but Ryan's chest swelled. It was humanistic grace. Forgiveness not as erasure, but evolution. Yet betrayal's echo lingered. Ryan couldn't shake Victor's words. The boy's the key. What leverage? A deeper dig, via hacker friend at NYU, revealed it. Elena's aneurysm wasn't natural. Toxicology whispers from the original autopsy. Suppressed, hinted at digitalis, foxglove poison, untraceable in grief's fog. Victor's firm had ensured her policy. A payout glitch had netted him extra. Had Laura known? Pushed her toward Thomas for round 2? The accusation burned. Ryan confronted Thomas that night, documents trembling in his hand. Dad. Mom. The words choked. Thomas scanned the pages, color draining. No. God, no. He sank to the rug, sobs racking. A man unmade. Ryan knelt, holding him as the pieces shattered. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. Not just financial, but mortal. Elena stolen not by fate but fraud. Matthew found them there at midnight, a tableau of grief. He didn't pry, just brewed tea and sat vigil, his presence a quiet anchor. As Thomas drifted to exhausted sleep, Ryan pulled Matthew to the roof, stars pricking the smog. How do we keep going? He whispered, voice frayed. Matthew turned him gently, eyes steady. One breath, one day, and me, always me. Their embrace was desperate, romantic in its rawness. A lifeline in the void, promising that even in darkness, light could be forged from shared scars. But Victor's ghost wasn't done. 2 days later, as feds swept the brownstone for bugs, a delivery arrived. Elena's wedding ring, bent and bloodied, in a velvet box. No note, just the implication. The war had gone personal, and Ryan realized. The truth he'd exposed hadn't just saved a life. It had ignited one, burning toward them all. The ring sat on the mantel like a cursed relic, its diamonds catching firelight in mocking twinkles. A talisman of losses layered too deep to mourn in one go. Ryan avoided it, focusing instead on the federal bubble. Agents Reyes and Patel rotating shifts. Their unmarked SUV a sentinel under the brownstone's stoop light. Life warped into a pressure cooker. Thomas on leave from the New Yorker, dictating notes from the study. Matthew editing footage in the basement darkroom, his usual wanderlust caged. Ryan zooming lectures, his essays on truth in media, now laced with unintended autobiography. The city, once a lover's playground, felt like an adversary, its alleys' eyes watching for weakness. Betrayal's aftershocks rippled outward. Thomas retreated into silence, poring over Elena's old journals, piecing together the woman he'd half forgotten in grief's blur. She suspected something. He confided one gray afternoon, pages yellowed and dog-eared, wrote about shadows in the numbers after the portfolio tanked. Ryan listened, heart twisting. Elena had been the humanist in their duo, volunteering at shelters, quoting Whitman on Democracy's Soul. Her death had been theft, not just of breath, but legacy. Vengeance simmered in Ryan, but Matthew tempered it. Rage blinds, he'd say, over late-night chess in the kitchen. His knight capturing Ryan's king with a gentle flick. Strategy wins. Strategy meant allies. Matthew looped in his vice editor, a bulldog named Carla who'd covered white-collar wolves for a decade. She connected them to a forensic accountant, a wiry woman named Lena who dissected Lang's web from her midtown cubicle. "It's a house of cards," Lena reported over encrypted video. Screens blooming with flowcharts. Offshores in Panama, shell core in Delaware. Victor's pulling strings from Jersey, but Laura's the front. And get this, your brownstone? It's collateral in a bigger play. Lang's angling for a class action settlement. $200 million if he flips on bigger fish. Thomas's testimony could torpedo it. The revelation landed like a gut punch. Thomas wasn't just a mark, he was a threat. They killed Mom to silence him. Ryan breathed, the pieces slotting with sickening clarity. Digitalis traces, buried in the rush of funeral arrangements. Victor's firm had advised the coroner. A quid pro quo. Thomas's face hardened, the editor resurfacing. Then we write the story. All of it. He fired off queries to old sources, a network of journalists hungry for the kill. But leaks sprang. A blurry photo of Ryan and Matthew leaving a safe house, splashed on a gossip blog with the caption, "Hero Son's steamy side piece?" The tabloid sting hurt, not for the insinuation, NYU's queer community rallied, hashtags trending stand with Ryan, but for the exposure. Matthew, out since 16, shrugged it off with gallows humor. Adds to my mystique. But Ryan felt the fracture, old insecurities whispering. What if this scares you off? The drama, the danger. They were on the fire escape again. City hum a distant roar, snowflakes melting on Matthew's lashes. He cupped Ryan's face, thumb tracing his lip. Drama? This is life, messy, real. And you're my favorite plot twist. The kiss deepened, emotional and unhurried. A reaffirmation amid the rubble. Romance, Ryan learned, thrived in adversity, its roots twisting through cracks to bloom defiant. Climax brewed in a Jersey safe house, a drab FHA rental where the feds stashed them for a week. Boredom bred bonding. Thomas teaching Matthew poker. Bluff like you shoot. Bold but calculated. Ryan and Matthew stealing kisses in the pantry, flour dusted from impromptu bread baking. One night, power outage plunged them into candlelight, shadows dancing like specters. Thomas opened up about Elena's courtship, picnics in the village, her laugh echoing in jazz clubs. She made me believe in second acts. His eyes on Ryan held layers. Pride, sorrow, a father's quiet hope. You make me believe again. You and him. The warmth cracked Ryan open. I love him, Dad. Really love him. Thomas smiled, faint but true. I see it. The way he frames you, not just in photos, but here. He tapped his chest. It was humanistic pinnacle. Acceptance not as milestone, but milestone woven into the everyday, threads of chosen families stronger than blood. But shadows encroached. Intel pinged. Victor cornered, plotting a desperate play. Drones buzzed the safe house perimeter. Decoy, but unnerving. Laura, out on bail for the Red Hook accessory charge, vanished. Her Soho digs emptied, forwarding address a ghost. Then, the betrayal no one saw coming. Carla, Matthew's editor, called frantic. Lang's got an inside man. Feds are compromised. Paranoia spiked. Reyes and Patel pulled them at dawn. Convoy to a secondary site in the Poconos. Pines whispering secrets under frost-laced boughs. Their isolation forged deeper. Ryan and Matthew hiked frozen trails, breath clouds mingling, talking futures. A loft in Bushwick, collaborations on docks exposing corporate sins. You, me, the truth, Matthew said, carving their initials in bark with a pocket knife. It was romantic whimsy, laced with drama's edge. Thomas, meanwhile, drafted his piece. The Widow's Web, How Greed Killed a Dream. Excerpts leaked to allies, building pressure. The break came via Lena's wire. Victor's burner traced to a Queens motel. Feds raided at dusk, storming rooms reeking of takeout and despair. Victor resisted wild swings, a confiscated Glock tumbling from his grip. No shots, but cuffs clicked like fate's punctuation. Laura surrendered hours later in a Times Square coffee shop, latte cooling untouched. Her mask finally slipped. It was survival, she claimed in interrogation tapes the feds shared. Victor broke me. Thomas was redemption. Lies, brittle as her alibi. Interviews peeled layers. Victor's confession, rambling and raw, admitted the digitalis, pushed on Elena during a consult for her stress, masked as wellness advice. She was collateral, he spat, eyes dead. The payout fixed the books. Thomas watched the footage in the Pocono kitchen, face stone, then shattered. A howl that echoed through pines. Ryan held him, Matthew a pillar at their side. It's over, Ryan whispered, but the word felt hollow. Over was illusion. Scars lingered. Back in the city, spring teased with crocuses pushing through concrete. A metaphor too on the nose. Charges mounted, murder, fraud, conspiracy. Victor faced life. Laura, 20 plus. Thomas's story broke in the Atlantic, a gut punch expose that won awards but no solace. The brownstone breathed easier, windows flung to breezes carrying lilac. Yet conflict crested in quiet ways. Ryan, adrift post-climax, questioned his path. Journalism chews you up, he told Matthew one dawn. Hudson glittering below their bench. What if I can't? Matthew's hand in his steady. Then we pivot. Together. It was the romance's core. Not grand gestures, but gritty grace. Love as verb. But betrayal's final twist waited. A letter arrived, postmarked Cayman's. Victor's smuggled pre-sentencing. To Ryan, you think you won? Elena knew. She came to me, begging mercy on your father's debts. I gave it until she threatened exposure. Her heart gave out. Coincidence? Lies or half-truth? Ryan burned it, ashes scattering on the wind. Truth, he'd learned, was mosaic fragments, not monolith. As cherry blossoms peaked in the park, Thomas hosted a non-wedding brunch. Mimosas, Elena's recipes, friends toasting resilience. Ryan, arm around Matthew, felt the arc bend toward light. The life saved wasn't just Thomas's. It was theirs, collectively, a testament to love's quiet revolution. Summer unfurled over New York like a fever dream, humidity clinging to skin like unresolved regrets. The skyline a haze of heat and half-healed wounds. The trial dominated headlines. Victor Lang's spectacle in federal court, a spectacle of tailored suits and trembling hands. Laura Voss a ghost in the gallery, her once lustrous hair now lank, eyes averted from the families she'd fleeced. Ryan attended sporadically, dragged by Thomas's insistence on witnessing justice. But each session carved deeper. Prosecutors parading Elena's photo, her smile radiant beside actuarial tables. The courtroom air thick with the banality of evil. Premeditated negligence. The DA termed the poisoning, a euphemism that galled. Victor took no pleas, his testimony a venomous aria blaming the system. Laura, anyone but the mirror. Matthew covered it for vice, his lens a shield, capturing not just the spectacle but the human fissures. Widows dabbing tears, investors hollow-eyed. It's catharsis, he'd say post-session. Developing prints in the brownstone's tub-turned darkroom, chemicals sharp as regret. Ryan nodded, but catharsis felt elusive. A bird he chased but couldn't grasp. Nights, he'd wake sweating from dreams of Elena's laugh morphing into gurgles. Victor's cufflink glinting like a noose. Matthew anchored him then. Arms a harbor, whispers of you're here. We're here weaving through the dark. Their love had deepened in the crucible, romantic in its tenacity. Stolen weekends upstate, where they'd swim naked in quarry lakes, bodies mapping each other's scars, emotional not erotic, a reclaiming of joy. Thomas, too, evolved. The Atlantic piece had catapulted him. Offers for podcasts, keynotes on ethical blind spots. But success was hollow. He channeled it into the Elena Hale Foundation, grants for investigative journalism scholarships, her humanism revived. She'd approve, he'd say, hanging a plaque in the study, but his eyes betrayed the ache. Ryan saw it clearest during quiet dinners, when forks paused mid-air, silences stretching like shadows. "You saved me twice," Thomas confessed one monsoon evening, rain lashing windows. "From Laura, from myself." Ryan waved it off, family. But the words mended something fundamental, a bridge rebuilt plank by plank. Yet conflict simmered beneath. Ryan's senior thesis loomed, a sprawling piece on digital age deceit. Drawing from their saga, professors praised its rawness, but peers whispered, "Too personal bias?" Imposter syndrome gnawed, amplified by a flare-up with Matthew. It started trivial. A cancelled shoot for Ryan's birthday, Matthew's deadline clashing with their plans. "Priorities," Ryan snapped, hurt-lacing accusation. Matthew fired back, "This is my job, not some hobby. You think I don't carry this too?" The fight escalated in the loft they'd sublet in the East Village, voices echoing off exposed brick, until Ryan stormed out, wandering Alphabet City's neon veins till dawn. Reconciliation came halting, humanistic in its humility. Matthew found him at their park bench, dawn gilding the Hudson, a thermos of coffee peace offering. "I hate fighting you," Matthew admitted, shoulders slumped. "But I won't apologize for chasing light." Ryan leaned in, forehead to forehead. "And I won't for needing you in mine." They talked till noon, fears of codependency, dreams deferred. Emerging forged stronger, love's drama yielding to deeper empathy. It was the story's emotional core. Not flawless heroes, but flawed men choosing grace. Betrayal's specter resurfaced in autumn's cusp, leaves turning like pages in a cautionary tale. A juror tampered, bribed by Lang's offshore remnants. Acquitting on lesser counts, Victor skating to 15 to life instead of 30. Outrage boiled. Protests outside the courthouse. Thomas's op-ed in the Times a clarion call. Ryan, gutted, channeled it into action, co-founding a watchdog app with NYU coders crowdsourcing fraud tips. Matthew documented the launch, his photos a gallery of resolve. Ryan at podiums, voice steady. Thomas in Elena's garden, planting bulbs as metaphor. But the real fracture hit closer. During a foundation gala at the Met, champagne bubbling like suppressed sobs, Ryan overheard Laura's lawyer schmoozing donors. Appealing on duress. Victor's puppet, poor thing. Rage blinded. Ryan cornered the man in a cloister's alcove, words venomous. She chose it. Every lie. Security intervened, but the fallout lingered. Thomas pulling Ryan aside, gentle rebuke. "We're better than them." Shame burned, but Matthew's later embrace soothed. "You're human, That's the point." As winter circled again, romance bloomed in small salvations. Matthew's exhibit, Fractured Frames, Love in the Lens, opened at a Soho co-op, Ryan's portrait central. Half-shadowed, eyes alight with unspoken stories. The dedication plaque read, "To truths that bind." Tears pricked during the toast. Thomas, beaming, raised his glass. To second chances. Back home, they made love. Not urgent, but reverent. Bodies a language of forgiveness. The brownstone's walls holding their sighs like secrets. Climax echoed in a quieter storm. Victor's suicide note, smuggled from Attica, arrived via mail. Rambling absolution, blaming the boy who started it all. Ryan. Guilt crashed, waves of what-ifs. "Did I push him there?" he agonized to Matthew, curled on the rug. "No," Matthew fierce. "You exposed rot." He chose the knife. Thomas concurred, sharing his own therapy epiphanies. "Grief isn't linear, son, but it lessens when shared." Group sessions followed. Father and son, Matthew orbiting, unpacking layers, emerging lighter. The humanistic turn deepened. Ryan's thesis earned honors, his prof quoting Whitman. "Henceforth I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune." Graduation in May was a triumph. Cap toss in Yankee Stadium, NYU's quirk. Matthew's ring glinting on Ryan's finger. Not proposal, but promise. Thomas's speech, impromptu. My son taught me love isn't blind, it's brave. Applause thundered. Tears flowed. Yet drama's undercurrent persisted. Laura's appeal gained traction. Celebrity lawyers spinning her as victim. Protests reignited. Ryan at the fore. Sign reading justice for Elena. Matthew's footage went viral, humanizing the fight, not vengeance but vindication. In a candlelit vigil by the Hudson, Ryan spoke, "We don't erase the lost. We honor them by living true." Matthew's hand in his, Thomas nodding, family, forged in fire. As stars wheeled overhead, Ryan felt the arc crest. Betrayal had scarred, but not defined. Love, messy, profound, had redeemed. The life-saved pulsed in their veins, a rhythm American as jazz. Resilient, raw, ever-evolving. 1 year post-wedding that wasn't. New York exhaled into tentative renewal, the skyline sharp against a sky bruised purple at dawn, as if the city itself pondered its own rebirth. Ryan stood on the brownstone stoop, coffee steaming in his grip, watching joggers blur past like specters of routine reclaimed. At 23, he was adrift in possibility. NYU diploma framed in the study. A junior reporter gig at ProPublica beckoning with investigative beats that felt like destiny's nod. But freedom tasted bittersweet, laced with the ghosts they'd exorcised. Victor's cell block end, a whispered overdose 6 months prior. Laura's appeal crumbling under fresh evidence, her sentence a quiet 12 years in Bedford Hills. Thomas had aged into wisdom, his memoir Blind Spots. A Father's Reckoning a bestseller, proceeds fueling the foundation's scholarships. Diverse voices unearthing truths Elena would champion. He'd started dating again, tentatively. A curator from the Frick, soft-spoken with a laugh like wind chimes. Ryan approved, not possessively, but with the humanistic grace of release. Letting go not as loss but expansion. Dinners now brimmed with stories, not silences. Thomas's toast at Ryan's graduation still echoed. To the boy who stopped time and started healing. Matthew was the constant, his freelance empire blooming. A Guggenheim Fellowship for a series on queer resilience in urban decay. Exhibitions from LA to Berlin. Their life wove seamless. The East Village loft there's now. Walls hung with his prints. Ryan's notebooks spilling essays on tabletops. Love had matured, romantic in its rhythms. Spontaneous drives to the Cape, where they'd walk beaches at low tide, toes in foam, debating ethics over lobster rolls. Quiet evenings curating playlists, Matthew's head in Ryan's lap, fingers tracing collarbones like Braille. No grand eros, but profound intimacy. Vulnerability voiced, conflicts aired before they festered. "You're my north," Matthew murmured one starlit night. Telescope trained on Orion from their fire escape. Ryan, heart full, "And you're the stars." Yet drama's embers glowed. A final betrayal surfaced in spring, innocuous at first. An unmarked envelope at ProPublica's offices, addressed to Ryan. Inside, faded Polaroids, Elena's, from her village days, tucked with a note in Victor's scrawl. "She loved you fiercest. Forgive the unforgivable." Forgery or deathbed truth? Ryan showed no one at first, wrestling alone the humanistic quandary. Could redemption arc for monsters? He burned them eventually, ashes to the East River, a ritual release. Some truths stay buried, he told Matthew later, over gin at a hidden speakeasy. Matthew nodded, clinking glasses. For peace. The climax, subdued but seismic, crested at the Foundation's inaugural gala. Elena's legacy ball, held in the brownstone's expanded garden. Fairy lights twining ivy like hope's veins. 200 gathered. Scholars, survivors, allies. Ryan emceed, voice steady, toasting the woman who taught us to see clearly, love deeply. Midway, a surprise. Thomas at the podium, envelope in hand. "Ryan, this past year, you've been my compass." He extended it, keys not to a car, but a co-op in the village, Elena's old haunt, renovated. "For you and Matthew, build your life there, like she did ours." Tears blurred. Applause swelled. Matthew, beside him, squeezed Ryan's hand. Eyes shining, a question unspoken. Later, in the garden's hush, amid jasmine and jazz, Matthew knelt, not with fanfare but quiet certainty. A simple band, silver etched with coordinates. Their park bench. Marry me, Ree. Not to fix anything, but to frame it all. Ryan's yes was a breath, a vow. Yes, to every messy, beautiful tomorrow. The wedding was theirs, intimate, American dream distilled. A rooftop affair in the village co-op, autumn leaves confetti, Thomas officiating with Whitman verses. Guests, NYU crew, vice familiars, foundation ments, a tapestry of chosen kin. Vows exchanged under a chuppah borrowed from a queer rabbi friend, blending traditions. In joy and sorrow, truth and trial, I choose you. Rings slid on, sealing not just union, but survival's gift. Post-honeymoon. A road trip through the Southwest, Matthew's lens devouring canyons, Ryan's journal filling with half-formed novels. Their life settled into humanistic cadence. Ryan's first byline dropped, Shadows of the Street, How One City's Frauds Prey on the Vulnerable, co-authored with a foundation scholar. Impact rippled, policy tweaks, a congressional hearing. Matthew's book followed, Exposed, Portraits of Persistence, Elena's photo closing it, captioned, The Light We Carry. Thomas visited often, the brownstone now a hub for potlucks, laughter echoing Elena's. One Christmas, snow blanketing the park, he gifted Ryan her journals, complete, annotated. Read them. She's in you. Ryan did. Nights by the co-op's hearth, Matthew dozing beside. Entries of love, doubt, dreams. Thomas sees stories. I see souls. Our boy will see both. The ending wasn't tidy. No villains redeemed, no pains erased, but profoundly human. Growth from grit, love as lodestar. Ryan, reflecting on that plaza interruption, saw not disruption, but dawn. He'd stopped a wedding, exposed a truth, saved a life. His father's, yes, but also his own and Matthew's woven into one. In America's vast, flawed heart, where betrayal bred but bonds endured, they thrived. Dramatic souls, emotional anchors, romantic wanderers, humanistic to the core. As the Hudson flowed eternal, Ryan traced Matthew's sleeping profile, whispering thanks to the dark. The boy who'd burst through doors had become the man who opened windows. To light, to love, to lives remade.